Civilizational collapse will have a failure of critical systems as a notable negative symptom. What is a critical system today? Today, it might be our large stockpiles of nuclear weapons. In a breakdown of political order, in a breakdown of global economic conditions, the machines will still work when we press the button. And the reason we don't press the button is because there are a bunch of very well-functioning institutions, things like the international order, things like the American executive branch, things like strategic command, and so on. It's a low bar. But there have been ancient equivalents when the Mongols, made a giant pyramid of skulls next to Baghdad. They also destroyed the irrigation system that had been maintained for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The result was famine. And the Mongols, even though they might want a taxable population that can grow, did not have the right engineers to rebuild those systems. And also, for a lot of this, there was permanent ecological damage. So even if you rebuilt the irrigation system, because of the disaster of the thing going away, desertification kicked in, right? The area turned into desert, which was previously artificially maintained. You should also consider the cost of something more subtle, an intellectual dark age. It might be, instead of someone pressing the button, it might be that there's a bug in the code, the new code that's written. By the way, we use floppy disks in the ICBM silos, right? So that's some legacy code, that's some well-tested code. So I feel safer with the floppy disks than I would if they were using something newer. But eventually we're going to have to go to something newer, so what if the code's bad? So that would be the intellectual dark age version of a critical systems failure. In the future, we might imagine more exotic ones. We might imagine a society where AI is outlawed, and then you have overall societal decline, but a local area where knowledge continues to progress. So you could have a situation where AI is essentially banned, and there are institutions enforcing this ban until the alignment problem is solved, and then those institutions break up. However, the researchers are now free to do their thing. That would also be a critical systems failure, assuming the hypothesis about the danger of such technology is accurate. Then point number 2, the loss of traditions of knowledge. I think I've talked about this extensively, but still, because something like Oxford University or something like the Royal Society is embedded into institutions that surround it, it does not necessarily have the ability to sustain itself. The remarkable thing about Christian monasteries in the early Middle Ages was that they sustained themselves completely independently from the surrounding society. Their libraries were not very impressive compared to the libraries held by the senatorial class. Even in the 4th century AD, Roman senators were highly literate and practiced classical Latin, and they would occasionally write letters complaining about, the roads are awfully dangerous this year. They did not have a perception that their society was one that's in decline. The Christians were a little bit crazy at that time, but they went into the hills and they set up these autarkic systems, and in these systems, they copied religious texts. And as a side effect, also some of the classical texts. Now, of course, we do have to credit Arab civilization in the 7th and 8th century for bringing us some of those poor 13%. But what people forget is that the Arab Empire was a multi-faith empire. There were copies made in Baghdad, which was not yet burned by the Mongols as it was centuries later, but a large chunk of the Arab literature was copied in Middle Eastern Christian monasteries. Okay, so a monastic tradition preserves probably 80 to 90% of the stuff we have because it had a functional institution that did not depend on the other institutions around it. Does academia today seem robust to social disruption? If we assume academia is the holder of this? What if it's Silicon Valley? What if Silicon Valley is the holder of technical knowledge and live innovation? Is that robust to the political climate, to the social climate? And then number 3, we have the destruction of capital. I think human ends are supreme, but I think we should agree that all else equal, it's good for humans to have tools. It's good for humans to have homes and so on and so on. So whenever there's a destruction of wealth, this is a tragedy. Wealth is not bad, Some people believe in decadence, and some people believe you can only create wealth by taking it away from someone else. Neither is the case. All else equal, you can make wealth, you can raise all boats. And all else equal, wealth is not the thing that causes civilizational decadence. And basically the difference here is that with civilizational collapse, there's a sudden massive destruction of capital. And with an intellectual dark age, there is a slow, ongoing, rising opportunity cost. If you want a mental image of the fall of the Roman Empire, you should imagine something like 200 years of GDP shrinking by about 1% a year. That's a more accurate picture than the barbarians burning everything down. And then the last point here is civilizational collapse has the problem of mass death. The Han Dynasty is the golden age of China. It's contemporary to the Roman Empire, so the 2nd and 3rd century AD. However, the Yellow Turban Rebellion ends this and starts off a series of catastrophic wars where over the course of the century, the population of Han China is reduced by 2/3. This is a population of 200 million people. There's starvation and there's killing. Some people have said, oh, Rome never really fell. What happened was a social transformation. Well, yeah, it's a transformation, and with an intellectual dark age, it's the cost of lives never lived. Exceptional lives, incredible lives. The cost of the Roman Dark Age is that there were never Romans visiting and sailing around the world, that there was never a lively discussion between Greek philosophers and Confucian scholars. The cost of our civilization of lives never lived might be that we can't actually take a vacation on the moon. My dad, when he was something like 9 years old and living in a very, an optimistic country, people forget this, communism was optimistic in the 1970s, wrote a simple essay about how, extending current trends in economic growth and technological progress, by the time he's a dad, he'll be able to take his kid on a field trip to the moon, right? He didn't take me to the moon. It's very disappointing.